What's going on, gurus, and welcome back to the IR Gurus channel. So today I plan on covering the LDAP utilities, but what I want to dive into is I'm not going to be touching on everything that the app can do. The LDAP utilities allows for a lot of different functionality. I'll talk about that functionality, but since I don't have a full LDAP system at my disposal, actually I'm going to be using an AD system for LDAP. But I will be pointing out a couple of knowledge base articles where you can go and check them out, and actually, find some additional helping features as we go through this. So let's go ahead and start this. So here in the LDAP solution here, this app, I've already got it installed, and I've already got it configured. I'm going to talk about the configuration a little bit, but if you want the full rundown on how to install apps, I will link up here in the top right the video that I did for installing apps and configuring them. So go take a look at that if you're trying to figure out how to do that. But for this video, we're just going to focus on the actual the LDAP utilities here. All right, so first things first, let's jump over here into the configuration. There's a couple of things that I want to show you about the LDAP app. So first things first, there's been a change since they hit the version 2.0 where you can actually use multiple LDAP utility or multiple LDAP systems, or essentially if you've got multiple domains or something like that that you're trying to connect to, we can actually connect to multiple LDAP systems for looking up different users, groups, changing passwords, such, and or doing that kind of thing. So for this system here, since I only have one system, you can see here that I just set it up for one server. That's all I'm worrying about connecting to. I've got my information entered all in here. But if you wanted to add multiple LDAP utilities, you could essentially just go ahead and make a copy of this, and we'll enter a little space down here. We'll paste this in down here. And then what we can actually do is in front of these in front of this bracket here, you can actually make a colon, and I could call this Muma Lab. And then over here, I could say, call this some other domain. And then essentially the way we would do this is when doing a lookup, we would just, in the scripts and stuff like that, we'll just define which one of these we want to hit. We'll either want to connect to the Muma lab or the some other domain here. And then of course you can start to build these connections and stuff out for each one of the domains that you're using. Since I've only got one integration here, one LDAP that I'm going to be working with, I'm just going to go ahead and erase this. But I wanted to show you guys how you could go about adding more domains if you're trying to use the LDAP system to look at multiple domains. All right. Now, as we go through the configuration, of course, we're just going to follow through here. We need the LDAP server name or the IP address. We're going to need the port to run off of. If you're using encryption, you can set up, change the port to 636 here and actually set up SSL right here. Of course, you can set up the type of authentication here. Since I'm using Windows, I'm going to use NTLM. And then I can actually come down and set up my NTLM username, which is going to be the Muma Lab. And then I set up a service account for SOAR. And then I've got the, is this LDAP, or is this Active Directory? Since this is an Active Directory system, I mark this as true. If you're just using LDAP, just keep that as false. Of course, your LDAP connection timeout, I think normally this is set to 10 seconds. I know at my previous employments, we had some problems where the LDAP lookups would take way too long. So these would time out all the time. I think I increased it to about 30 seconds there. So that should be a good timeout range. If it's taking more than that, then it's probably there might be something going on with your LDAP system. But play around with that so you can kind of get an idea of where you're actually going to want that timeout range. Of course, for the LDAP password, I want to hide that password, so I was able to set up my secret over here, and then was able to add that variable down here. And then, of course, you've got the ability to add your user account here if you're not using NTLM, and you would kind of structure it this way. All right, so that's it for the configuration. Of course, come down here and test your configuration out when you're done. Go up here, hit save changes when you're done. And then since we're going to deploy this, if you haven't deployed it already, you come out to your page here, make sure your app host is still selected. And then, of course, hit deploy, or as I see it now, it's undeploy, but you can hit deploy and that'll create the container that you need to start doing your LDAP lookups. All right, so now that we got the app installed itself, let's take a look at one of the things that it added. It added this data table. Actually, it added the LDAP query results down here. So what we can do is we can open this up and we click through this. We can see it's asking for some interesting things here. This may or may not be useful for your environment. But what I decided to do was I decided to create a new data table that I was going to put all this information in. Now, the reason I created a new data table instead of making changes to the data table that was already here is because if I ever update this app, what it's going to do is it's going to change everything that I changed about this LDAP query results table, and it's going to actually convert it back to whatever the integration initially starts it as. That's why if you're ever going to make a change to one of the existing workflows or one of the existing data tables that a integration provides you, I always recommend to actually build this out yourself or create a new table. So that's exactly what I did. I created this LDAP data table. You can see I'm looking for username, the name of the person, title of the person, department, email, location, manager. I tossed device ID in here, but we won't be showing that off this time. Then I added that data table up to my artifacts tab and I saved it. So now what we can do is we can see here, if we jump over to customizations, these are all of the customizations that it added by default to the system. So I just did a quick search here for the workflows. These are the workflows that I can kick off right away after installing the app. But these workflows are going to need some work because they're just set up generically. So what we're going to do is first we're going to go ahead and look at the LDAP search query here. So your integration will have a pre-processed script, which will be building out your query into your LDAP system. Now, what I did was created a playbook that I'm going to run instead. And I actually copied that information from this playbook here. I copied it into a note up top here so that I could remember exactly how it was built in the old system. But I made a note out of it so that it's not actually part of the script itself. But then what I did down here is I started to build out the query that I want to use. So first off, the search param that I want to use, this one is going to be the artifact value. And then the search attributes. Essentially, these are what I'm looking for when I'm pulling my query back. So in this one, I'm looking for the SAM account name, which would be their username. I'm looking for their CN name, which is their full name. I'm looking for the title, their company title. I'm looking for the department name that they're in. I'm looking for their mailing address, which is actually their email address, just to be clear there. I'm looking for their physical delivery office name. This is the attribute that is used for AD's their physical address name. And then, of course, I want to find their manager as well so that I can put their manager's information into the incident too. The search base is going to be where am I going to be searching for these users. I just put it in the default directory here. So I'm just searching all of my LDAP database here, which of course this is an AD database here. And then last but not least, I build out my search params. So the search params are down here. There's a lot you can do with search params. This one specifically is I'm doing an and here, so I'm looking for multiple things to be true. So what I did here was, first thing that needs to be true is the object class has to be a user. So I'm only looking for users here. If I wanted to look up groups, I could put groups in there. If I was looking for system names and stuff like that, I could put the system name attribute for that in there. So that's what I'm looking for there. Then what I'm looking for is the SAM account name. Now, earlier I mentioned that you can actually build it out so that you are looking for maybe an email address as well. Now, instead of having multiple lookup scripts just to compare the email address or the user account, what I can actually do is build it all into one search. And the way that I would do that is by using a pipe, which is actually an OR within LDAP. Now, a lot of things I'm mentioning here are things that I just learned as I started to learn LDAP a little bit. By no means am I a LDAP expert here, but I will link this page right here in the description below. This is Microsoft's LDAP page where they can kind of start to explain how to build out your queries for different things like the object type being a user versus a computer or a group or something like that. So you can start to learn how to build these things out, and then you can start to learn how to build these a little bit more complex as well. But just to give you a quick idea, let me go in here and make a quick change of this search, and I'll be right back. All right, now that we're back here, what I wanted to show you is that I have altered this search filter so that it'll actually use that LDAP parameter that I defined up here as the artifact value as either a SAM account name or an email address. Actually, it's going to look for both, but essentially what I've got here is I created an OR using that pipe command there. And I then provided it two things. So I'm saying this or this has to be true. So what I'm saying here is the SAM account name should be equal to the LDAP param, which again is what I defined here, or the mail has to equal the LDAP param, which would be their email address. So either one of these could be true. And then, because I've got the and here, the object class has to be true for this parameter or for this search filter here to pull back the right results. Again, those results being whatever I defined my search attributes as. So I'm going to be pulling back that for whichever user or users it finds. From there, then what I can do is I've got this built out here. So I can save this script. And then what it's going to do is in the output script, I'm of course outputting this as LDAP output. And then over here, I'm putting a script. I've got a script that is built out here that will parse through this information or the information it pulls back. And well, that is if it's true. So if it comes back as successful, it'll parse through that and it'll put it into the LDAP data table that I created. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that would look now. All right, so what I'm going to do here now is I am going to jump into my LDAP system. You can see that we've got an Edgar Johnson here that we are going to be performing a lookup on. If I actually double click into his account here, I can see that he has his information here is listed. I can also come over here to the account. I can see what his username is. But let's say that we are in an incident and Edgar gets added to the system. So we'll look up his user account here. Edgar J as his user. And this does not have to be capitalized. I can put that in lowercase. That doesn't matter. And I can hit create. Now, once he's added in here, what I can do is actually perform my action. Here's my LDAP lookup. You can see up in the top right, it kicked it off and is running. And we'll scroll down just a little bit here. There we go. The news feed came back that it changed the LDAP data table. So let's go ahead and jump over to the LDAP data table here. Oh, it was on the same page. All right, so we can see here it was able to pull back Edgar Johnson. He's a security engineer. He's a tier 2 analyst. Here's his email address. There's his remote location. That's what he's listed as, where he works. And then, of course, his manager I've got listed here as a Rob Davis. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to copy his email address out of here. We are going to come up to the top, and we are going to add it to an artifact. Now, real quick, I wanted to touch on something here because I forgot to show this earlier. But there's an LDAP, or within the LDAP lookup, I did have to make a change on the conditions, adding the email sender or the email recipient, as well as a user account, of course. But that's what we had to change our condition to so that we could actually run this lookup on this user as well. So now that we're back here, we'll say that the email recipient was Edgar here. We'll create this artifact. After we added this artifact, what we'll do is we will do the LDAP lookup on him. Again, we see that the LDAP lookup is running. We'll come down here and look for the newsfeed update. See, it added a new row to that LDAP table again. And as you can see here, it pulled his information back again. As a tier 2 analyst, there's his email, location, manager, all the information we need here. So you can see now that we were able to do that LDAP lookup with this LDAP query here. Now this is going to be an LDAP user lookup. What I'll do is I will actually export this playbook and I will leave it for you guys on the GitHub page, so you guys can jump over there, take a look at that, download that, and use that if you want to. But this is how you would be able to do a user lookup. Again, if you wanted to do a group lookup or a lookup on a system or something like that, you have the ability to do lookups however you build out that query that we have right here. So down here on this LDAP search filter, that's where you're going to define where you're going to be looking there. All right, guys. So the next thing we're going to handle here is turning a user's account on and off. This can be used for termination process, or it could be used for, if you guys have a compromised account or something like that. We can go ahead and block accounts this way as well. And we'll also touch on just in a second changing passwords to disable accounts as well. So the first things first here, we're going to cover this one. So what I did again is I converted this into a playbook. Again, I will make this playbook visible for you guys out on the IR Gurus page or on the GitHub. So go ahead and take a look there if you want to get access to this. One thing that I have found out is if this errors out on you, it very well may be that your account that you're using does not have permissions. So you may need to make sure that from your AD team that this account has the permissions to be able to lock user accounts or change passwords and stuff like that. So just a side note there. But again, I created this. Essentially what this is going to do is it's first going to do an LDAP search. Make sure that it can find an account. If it's able to find an account, then it's going to toggle that account on or off based on what we defined here. So we have a form that's going to pop up that is essentially going to ask if we want to enable or disable the account. And then and this condition is going to be, again, same thing. It's either got to be on an email address or on a user account. If it does not find an account when it does that, it's going to go the else route, and it's just going to go ahead and not finish successfully. The playbook will say that it finished successfully, but you won't have a note left behind. Do this on a side by side here so that we can see both the AD system, and we can see the SOAR system side by side. So what we're going to do here is, again, we're going to use Edgar here. We're going to go ahead and toggle his access. As you can see, Edgar is currently enabled, so we're going to go ahead and disable him. So we'll hit execute. We'll see that it's running here, and we'll give it a second to finish running. All right, we see that it finished running. We don't have any new errors up there, so we know that this was successful. We can also see that this is successful by going to our notes here and scrolling down, and we can see that Edgar is now set to disabled. And then it gives us some additional information here on Edgar. So now let's go ahead and say that we have resolved the situation here, and we want to re-enable his account. We can go up and find in the artifacts again, we can find Edgar, and we can select toggle access. And this time, before I did this, I want to show you on the right hand side, we can refresh the AD system, and now we can see he's got that little icon down here in the bottom right of the user icon that shows that he is disabled. If I right click on this, I can also see that it's asking me to enable his account. So what we're going to do here, now that we can see that he is disabled over here, we will turn around and enable him, and we will hit execute. And again, we're going to see that start running, and we'll give it a second again to complete. All right, and again, no new errors. We can jump over here to the artifacts and scroll down and see that now it is completed running and he is enabled. Again, that additional information on him. And if we come over here and we do a refresh, we can see that now his account is re-enabled. And if I right click here, it does give me the option to disable his account. All right, guys, and last but not least, the one thing I wanted to touch on was setting or resetting, technically, your or a LDAP password. Now, I know that there's a couple other things that we can do here, such as adding or updating a user, or adding and removing a user from a group. We can do that as well. But I think that kind of becomes self-explanatory when you guys start deciding which groups you may want to remove somebody from. You can start to define that there. But the reason I wanted to cover the set or reset password is actually because there's kind of a caveat here where you can only set and reset passwords if you are using secure LDAP. Secure LDAP is going to use SSL communication with your LDAP server. It's also going to run on port 636. So if you do not have those turned on within your configuration settings, you will not be able to run the set password workflow here, which is going to be right here. You won't be able to run that. That is, I don't know if it'll run just fine on LDAP, but I do know on an Active Directory server that will not work. That is a requirement from Microsoft's Active Directory side. That is not something that we're able to control with our scripting or anything like that. That is a requirement that Microsoft has put on their product. So with that being stated, I've actually turned this workflow that we've got here into a playbook. I will make this playbook here available out on our GitHub, so feel free to jump out there. That will be linked down below as well. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to walk you through this and explain to you what is going to happen. However, I do not have secure LDAP set up within my environment, so unfortunately I won't be able to run this and actually display it on my Active Directory server. So I am wanting to explain this to you and wanting you to understand the caveat, but won't be able to fully show you this. So the first thing we're going to do when you activate this playbook here is you are going to have to fill out 2 of 3 things. Now, the first thing is actually the last thing on this list here, which is the do you want to return the new password? That is essentially saying, do you want us to post that password, whatever the new password is, as a note within the incident. That way you can look this up later so that the user can get this password. That may be a no for you guys. You guys may just want to change the password, have the user call in and do the reset password thing, depending on what your protocol is for a compromised account. The next two options, you have to enter one of these two options. The first option is going to be you provide the new password. You can provide that new password, whatever you want that standard password to be. You can provide that, and that will be what we reset it as. However, we do have another option, which is the auto password length here, in which if you give it a numerical number, such as 15, then it will auto generate a new password at 15 characters in length. When it generates that password, it will then you will have that option again to return that password if you want to. But then this also makes it safer where you're not using a standard password that you're applying to all compromised accounts, in which then it becomes obvious what that password would be for anybody who's potentially trying to do bad things within your environment. So that's the way you can do that. Of course, our condition down here is going to be either an email or a user account is what we can use to reset this. And then essentially what we're going to do here is the first step here is going to be do the LDAP lookup, make sure that there's a user associated with what we've provided it. After it does that, if there's no user, it's going to close the playbook or end the playbook. And it's not going to leave any kind of note or anything like that. However, if it is successful, what it's going to do is it's going to reset that password here. And then after it resets the password, it will leave a note saying that it was successful. And then if you chose to leave the password or to return that password here, it will leave that in the note as well. And then, of course, it'll end that playbook. Just to show how that form looks, if you go into an incident here and we find Edgar, still that questionable guy here, we can go ahead and reset the password here. Once we reset the password, it's going to ask us for those three things. Again, either fill in the top section or fill in the middle section here, and then fill in this last section here of either yes or no. Once we have provided this, such as this here, we're going to have a randomly generated password of 15 characters, and then we're not going to return that. We're going to hit execute, and it's going to go through and reset that user's password for us. All right, so now that we have covered the resetting of passwords as well, I hope that this really helped you guys understand how to use the LDAP utility. It gives us a lot of different functionality that as security professionals, we will likely use this on a regular basis. I know I was a little late getting this video out. Unfortunately, I hit a snag when I was trying to show that last resetting of passwords. I planned on releasing this video yesterday, but essentially I was having problems finding, I had problems finding out that AD actually does require it to be SSL connection to be able to reset passwords. Everything else should work fine. You shouldn't have any problems doing any of the other functions, but with resetting passwords specifically, again, you will have to have that SSL connection there. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and end the video here. If you are getting a lot of helpfulness out of this, please give me a like and a follow. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to see a video, as I mentioned before, just leave a comment below, and I will see you guys next time. See you, gurus.